These pieces of information are buried in mainstream media articles like the deceased are buried under the rubble in Gaza. So I read half a dozen articles before I finally found this information on the 5th page of a Wall Street Journal article. We told you they were never gonna stop killing. And because the American government keeps writing them checks. Oh, you murdered more Palestinians. You violated Trump's ceasefire. Who cares? Israel did commit a genocide. They did starve people, and they own bitches like John Fetterman.
The Israelis have already de facto annexed Gaza and de facto annexed the West Bank. Their principal goal now is to ethnically cleanse the Palestinians out of those two areas. The idea of ethnically cleansing Greater Israel has been wired into Zionism from the very beginning.
Legendary political scientist John Mearsheimer, the man who co-wrote the book, The Israel Lobby, unfortunately does not believe that the ceasefire in Gaza will hold. And honestly, with some of the latest developments, he has good reason to believe that the ceasefire will not hold, as both sides have already begun to accuse each other of violating the deal. Now, I want to be very precise with our rhetoric and our language when we cover this story. I made a few mistakes yesterday in referring to this as a peace deal. The fact of the matter is there hasn't been a peace deal, I want to say yet, but when it comes to a peace deal, honestly, I don't know if we're ever even going to reach that. So what we're really discussing here is a ceasefire, and the question is whether it's going to hold. Now, unfortunately, there have been more Palestinian deaths in the Gaza Strip at the hands of the IDF. The IDF has, admitted to carrying out some of these acts of violence. So as of this morning, the Palestinian Health Ministry in Gaza says that 44 people have been killed and 29 injured in the past 24 hours as a result of Israeli attacks, taking the death toll to 67,913. And according to The Independent, seven Palestinians have been killed after Israeli forces opened fire on suspects. They say approach soldiers near an agreed upon ceasefire line in northern Gaza. So look, we have no way of confirming that. And if I had to bet money on it, I would not in any way trust what the IDF has to say. I also wouldn't just trust what Hamas has to say. But the idea that you shouldn't kill 7 people simply because they're approaching you. Remember, Palestinians are unarmed. Why is that the first response? To just shoot and kill 7 people right there on the spot, but they have confessed to that. Now, an Israeli drone strike also killed 5 people as they returned to check on their homes in Gaza's eastern Shijaya neighborhood, according to authorities. A separate strike killed 1 person and injured another near Khan Yunis. Now, if you guys can remember from our coverage yesterday, I talked a little bit about how Israel agreed that they would no longer carry out during the ceasefire any offensive military operations, that they would only carry out defensive military operations. And so the argument that they're going to make moving forward is every Palestinian that the IDF kills posed a threat. They did what they did because they were just defending themselves. But I also want to remind you all that they're still not allowing international journalists into the Gaza Strip where maybe some investigative reporting can confirm which side is telling the truth, which side is lying. And it's a terrible situation. Now, on top of that, there's the issue of the deceased hostages and the fact that Hamas has not returned all of the remains of the deceased hostages. So look, prior to the ceasefire, Hamas was in possession of the remains of 26 deceased hostages. So far, say that again, Cenk?
I think it's 28, Anna.
Okay.
Yeah, I think
I'm sorry. The Guardian said 26 today, but okay, that's fine. So, all right, let's go with 28. It doesn't matter. They haven't released the remains of every deceased hostage, and that has upset the Palestinians. But there's nuance in this part of the story that I want to talk a little bit about. Now, they've returned the remains of 4 of the deceased hostages. There are reports that they are planning on returning 4 more deceased hostages later tonight. So we'll wait and see if that happens. However, it's really, really important to keep in mind that if you look at the ceasefire deal that was signed by the 2 parties, right? This is the first stage of the ceasefire. There was an agreement that, look, it's going to be difficult to locate the remains of all of these deceased hostages. Some of them are buried under the rubble, for instance. And so as part of this deal in writing, it was agreed upon that Hamas might need a little more extra time to do what they are agreeing to do in returning all of the hostages, including the remains of the deceased. Families of deceased hostages, though, who are supposed to be returned to Israel as part of President Trump's 20-point plan for peace, said that they were angered that only 4, and you're right, Cenk, 4 of the 28 bodies had been returned. And the Hostages Families Forum, which is an advocacy group for the hostages and the hostage families, of course, called the failure to hand over all the bodies a violation of the agreement and called for the immediate suspension of all agreement implementation until all the remaining bodies are returned to Israel. Now that's pretty disastrous, but I think that's the first piece of evidence we can point to when we say that the protests about ending the war wasn't really about the plight of the Palestinian people. It was really about releasing all the hostages. What happens to the Palestinians, I don't think the hostage families really care too much about, but whatever, putting that aside, a spokesperson for the forum later said that it wasn't calling for a return to fighting, but for Hamas to be held accountable to meet its obligations as part of the agreement. But they are so far meeting the obligations as part of their agreement. As Jeremy Scahill reports, during Gaza negotiations, Israel understood it would take time to recover all bodies of deceased captives. A specific mechanism for recovering the bodies was agreed. Now Israel is pretending that didn't happen so it can violate the deal and cut the agreed aid shipments in half. And in fact, that is what is happening. Israel had initially agreed to allow 600 aid trucks into the Gaza Strip. Now they're saying, okay, well, since Hamas allegedly hasn't fulfilled its promise, which again, they are trying to find the remains of the hostages, and they are actually following through with the agreement based on what's in writing. We're gonna go ahead and do collective punishment and severely limit the aid that enters the Gaza Strip. And so that's what we're dealing with now. Red Cross spokesperson Christian Cardone told reporters in Geneva that not all entry points are open to get humanitarian aid inside Gaza. And that's the main issue right now. And that's what humanitarians, including the ICRC, have been calling for in the last hours, is making sure that because of the huge needs, all entry points can be open. We are still witnessing only a few trucks coming in and large crowds approaching these trucks in a way that does absolutely not conform to humanitarian standards. And the coordinator of government activities in the territories, COGAT, the Israeli military body overseeing aid flows, said the restrictions were being imposed because, quote, Hamas violated the agreement. Again, they didn't. You can read the agreement yourselves. Regarding the release of the bodies of the hostages, no fuel or gas will be permitted except for specific humanitarian infrastructure needs, the note added. And if you guys can also remember, Cenk, yesterday we were talking about how as soon as the bombing stopped, Palestinians started looking for the remains of their family members under the rubble, but it's really hard to do it because they don't have the heavy machinery necessary to get through, heavy rubble. And so they're using pickaxes, they're making do with what they have, they're using their bare hands. But if in fact you have the remains of hostages buried under the rubble, I mean, Israel can help by allowing the heavy machinery into the territory so they can, get through the rubble and find the remains of, yes, the Israeli hostages, but also innocent Palestinians who have been trapped under the rubble for who knows how long.
Yeah, so it's funny you were saying that right as one of our members wrote in, Impeach for Peace said, we won't provide you with equipment to remove the rubble, but you broke the peace deal by not giving us hostages buried under the rubble. Well, how are we supposed to get them, right? So that's a great point by one of our members. Embedded Dude, another member on TYT.com said, one dead Israeli hostage is worth 10,000 Palestinian people. When it comes to American media, I think that is literally true. We're gonna talk about that in a second. And last member, and we do the show together with our members, so sign up now if you can, hit the join button below, etc. Wang Jun said, Israel violating the ceasefire is the biggest we told you so since the last time Israel violated a ceasefire. So now, let me break it down a little bit further. So there was 20 hostages that remained alive, 28 that were dead, right? So they returned the 20 that are alive. That's the most important thing, and I'm thrilled that those guys are back. We covered on the show yesterday, the moms, dads, girlfriends, wives in tears, and super understandable, and thank God they're back. The dead are important to their family members. I understand that. So had 28 left. They returned 4 initially. They're returning 4 tonight. So there's 20 left that are dead. But Hamas had already explained to Israel and the other people involved in the peace negotiations that they don't necessarily have them and they need to find them. In fact, I'm going to add on to what Anna said with a part I found from the Wall Street Journal. But you have to understand something, and this is important. These pieces of information are buried in mainstream media articles like the deceased are buried under the rubble in Gaza. So I read half a dozen articles before I finally found this information on the 5th page of a Wall Street Journal article, okay? So they say, quote, Hamas had communicated to mediators that it didn't know where all the bodies were, and the two sides agreed to set up an international task force to search for the remaining bodies. So Hamas has definitively not broken the deal. Now, did you see that on cable news? Did you see that as a headline anywhere? No, what I have read and seen all over mainstream media is Hamas breaks the deal, they had it coming. Hamas breaks the deal, Hamas breaks it. You're lying, you're literally lying. Or you're ignorant buffoons who are actors reading a script that your producer wrote for you and your producer is lying. You ignorant buffoons, this is important. Get it right for the first time in your lives. But nope, they're all gonna lie on behalf of Israel. And then when we say, hey, it looks like you're working for Israel, they're like, how dare you, you anti-Semite. Of course we're gonna lie on behalf of Israel. Well, then you're not news. And by the way, I say go to Israel, but Israel has way better press than we have here. Israeli press holds the Israeli government accountable way more than American press does. So now we get to how Israel is violating the deal. So look, guys, I thought it was 53% because that's what I was reading in the past. Now they're clarifying, no. Israel currently occupies 58% of Gaza. So they already stole more than half of Gaza. They're never gonna give it back. They're never gonna withdraw. Everyone who isn't stupid knows that, or ignorant, right? Well, to be fair, most are in the ignorant category. And if you're accidentally ignorant because you watch cable news or you read the New York Times, I don't blame you, right? They're just purposely lying to you over and over and over again on behalf of their beloved Israel. So they already stole all that land. And if I'm wrong and they withdraw completely, oh my God, of course I'll come out and tell you. You know why? Because I'm in the news business where we actually report things, whether it's favorable or unfavorable to our point of view. Unlike the mainstream media who hide facts from you. All right, so in this case, they say the 5 unarmed Palestinians approached the yellow line. So you have begun to approach the area of Gaza we stole from you earlier by murdering your family members. That's it, kill them all. Because we told you they were never gonna stop killing. And because the American government keeps writing them checks. Oh, you murdered more Palestinians. You violated Trump's ceasefire. Who cares? Write them another check, write them another check. And American media, oh, Israel, Israel, the Palestinian dirty savages, right? I'm so sick of our disgustingly racist media that it constantly smearing Palestinians. And of course, Israel cut all the aid in half, as Anna told you. So they're back to murdering, they're back to starving. Day one, we told you this government of Israel is a terrorist government. They're never gonna stop murdering the Palestinians. They're never gonna stop stealing their land and trying to create greater Israel. And they say it, they say they want greater Israel, and that includes Gaza as the West Bank. The only reason why that's not crystal clear to everyone in America is because the American media absolutely refuses to tell you what the Israeli government officials actually say. Like, for example, did you read everywhere? Did you see on cable news that Netanyahu said in Hebrew, as we reported yesterday? Oh, the campaign's not over. He has no intention of listening to Trump's peace plan. None, zero. He said it. He said he's on a spiritual and historical mission to capture greater Israel, which includes Gaza and the West Bank. But the American media will lie on behalf of Netanyahu 2,000 times over and do their stupid propaganda as they go back to their genocide immediately.
Social media was an accelerant for anti-Semitism, the cheapening of our language, genocide, and using those terms. I mean, that's just categorically not what occurred in the Gaza war. Whether it's the blood libel, whatever that is called, it's like Israel never targeted civilians. and they never tried to starve or committed any kinds of genocide. And that's been what's so difficult for me is like being devotion to Israel becoming increasingly incompatible with being a proud Democrat now too.
During his interview with Barry Weiss on her podcast, Honestly, Senator John Fetterman seems to have a difficult time understanding why there's been this groundswell of anger and criticism toward the Israeli government. Barry Weiss thinks it has to do with algorithms and social media platforms. But I have a different answer. What say you, Cenk?
Yeah, so Israel did commit a genocide. They did starve people, and they own bitches like John Fetterman, and they get the American government to work for them, but also tons of people in media, including Barry Weiss, because as you're about to see, the media in this country is covering up the land theft that is definitively happening in Gaza, and you're going to see evidence of it now.
That's exactly right. So Israel has apparently destroyed more than 1,500 buildings in Gaza since the ceasefire was reached back in October 10th. Okay, so since October 10th, they have destroyed 1,500 buildings, many of which, of course, were residential homes. And all of these structures have been destroyed where Israel is essentially occupying 53% of the Gaza Strip. So there's supposedly this yellow line, and the area in which the IDF is currently at, they're basically doing these controlled demolitions. They're demolishing the homes. Now, the reason why this is relevant is because according to Trump's peace deal, Israel is supposed to withdraw from the Gaza Strip eventually. But it's become abundantly clear that that is not what they're gonna do. That is not what they intend to do. And in fact, they're clearing the way to essentially settle that land. So let's get to the actual evidence here. So BBC's Verify was able to make this assessment using satellite imagery as recent as November 8th. But they do warn that the actual number, the specific number of destroyed buildings could actually be significantly higher because satellite imagery is not available in some areas in which the IDF is occupying that 53% of the Gaza Strip. Now, verified videos showing controlled demolitions and excavators tearing down buildings published to social media since the ceasefire have also been geolocated to areas behind this so-called yellow line. And while there are absolutely some concerns that Israel is, doing what they typically do, violating the ceasefire deal, an IDF spokesperson told the BBC, or BBC Verify specifically, that it was acting in accordance with the ceasefire framework. And you know what, Cenk? I think this might be one of the rare instances where the IDF is telling the truth, because I don't really trust the Trump administration in wanting to broker real peace between the Israelis and the Palestinians. I mean, Jared Kushner, the president's son-in-law, salivates at that oceanfront property, right? So, I mean, it starts with the 53% that Israel is currently occupying, and I'm sure it'll expand further from that. Now, let's see what accordance with the ceasefire looks like according to the Israelis. So we're gonna show you a few examples that were provided by BBC Verify. Again, these are structures that have been destroyed since the ceasefire. So this is Abbasan al-Kabira, and you see the image on the left-hand side. That's on October 14th, 2025. And then as of November 10th, 2025, all of those structures have been destroyed, absolutely demolished. Lana Khalil, who actually used to live in that area before she was displaced to nearby Al-Mawasi, described her home as being a heaven and full of farms and vegetables. She says that the Israeli military left nothing to us. They demolished everything. Our hearts are broken. Guys, I mean, just think about your home and what your home represents. It's the place you go to for comfort, for safety. It's where all the things you love are. And Israel just comes in, destroys these homes, and the US just sits idly by, allows it to happen. In fact, bankrolls it. Let's give you one other example. This one isn't as stark, but you can see that the remaining structures were destroyed. This is in Al Bayuk, and on the left-hand side, you'll see what it looked like on October 14th. And as of November 5th, anything that remained was pretty much destroyed. So the destruction is also taking place in Gaza City. Let's be clear about that. And Israel has defended its actions by claiming that they're dismantling terror infrastructure, because that's all they need to say. They're demolishing terror infrastructure, use the word terrorism, use the word terror, and all is good. They can get away with anything.
Yeah, so obviously they're never gonna withdraw. We told you that from day one, we were right. Meanwhile, mainstream media said, oh, well, that's conspiratorial and how dare you, beloved Israel, and they're just doing self-defense. We said that they would take the land. Now they have 53% of the land. We said they would destroy things and then rebuild it for Israel. Now they're destroying literally everything in the part that they control. They haven't followed the ceasefire at all. They also continue to bomb Gaza. They've killed hundreds of Palestinians. Scores of children have been murdered by Israel since the ceasefire because their plan has always been, and we told you they're paying $1,500 to American mercenaries. They were earlier for every home that they destroyed. And Anna's right, imagine it's your home. It's got all the pictures of your family in there. It's got all your worldly possessions. It's where you grew up or your kids grew up. And they come in and they bulldoze it, they explode it. And then they say, yeah, of course. And then you ask them, why are you doing that? They go, well, we need a safe haven for Jews. But the Palestinians don't need a safe haven. The Palestinians deserve no haven, no home, nothing. Israel has the right to take all their land, murder them, ethnically cleanse them from that land, and then take it for themselves while our grotesque media and our grotesque politicians cover for them and go, oh no. And you see that bitch Fetterman? Oh, you can't call this a genocide. Oh no, I don't know why. I mean, how dare they say things like this about Israel? Oh, come on, man. You're pathetic, but you're not just embarrassing yourself anymore. You're embarrassing us. You're a United States senator who's sitting there groveling at the feet of Israel and Netanyahu, go, please, I'll send you more, not of my money, of my taxpayer money. I'll rob them for you. I'll rob their money and give it to you for ethnic cleansing. And then he goes on the propagandist Barry Weiss's show called Honestly. And they talk about, it's poor Israel. Why is social media showing Israel's crimes? We used to be able to cover up all the crimes with mainstream media. Don't worry, Barry's now in charge of CBS, and soon she might be in charge of CNN. And don't worry, Larry Ellison and all the other people have literally said in public, no, we're going to support Israel, and that's why we're buying up the media. But don't say it because it's a trope, right? It's a trope. But they're saying it, we're not saying it. And now it's clear as day, and you're seeing it in the pictures, and BBC, thank you for covering it. You need to go to outside of American press for it. Yeah, absolute destruction of all that land so that Israel can come in and say, well, there's nothing left to come back to. So the Palestinians can't come back and we're never leaving. And I guess we're gonna have to rebuild it. Well, we'll rebuild it for Israel. If you think they're not gonna do that, you're either a liar, you're biased and you can't see straight, or you're the dimmest light there is. Like, oh, I wonder why they are destroying all the Palestinian homes. And it looks like they're not leaving, even though they promised to leave. That is so strange. It's not strange at all. That was the plan all along. The only question was, how much of Gaza could they steal? And right now it stands at 53%. Anyone telling you anything else literally works for Israel and does Israeli propaganda on their behalf.
Gazans thought this kind of trauma was over, but no. As the airstrikes continued overnight, casualties mounted, among them children. One missile hit a camp next to Aqsa Hospital in the center of Gaza, where patients and their families were sleeping. God help us, said Amna Kranawi. What kind of a truce is this? It's a fragile one, with both sides accusing the other of violations.
Maybe it's the fact that I've been doing this job for nearly 2 decades and I'm just kind of fed up with just the endless euphemisms, the lies, the lack of straight talk. So let me just give you straight talk right now. There is no ceasefire in Gaza. When over 100 people get slaughtered in a single night, that's not a ceasefire. So with that in mind, last night, at least 104 Palestinians were slaughtered by the Israelis. in airstrikes across Gaza. 46 of them happen to be children. But if the Israelis aren't slaughtering children, what else would they be doing? It was the deadliest attack since the so-called ceasefire came into effect on October 10th. They burned children while they were asleep. Hanin Meter, whose sister and nephews were killed in a strike, shouted in the morgue at Nasser Hospital in the southern city of Khan Yunis. This just happened last night. And the response that you will inevitably get from Israel's defenders is, what about October 7th, 2023? Because those lives mattered. The lives of Palestinian children, innocent civilians in Gaza, they don't matter at all. Please don't talk about them. What about October 7th? In the Barij refugee camp, 5 members of a single family were reportedly killed in a strike on their home. How do you justify that? Striking homes? Okay. Reporter Mohammed al-Munirawi was among those killed, bringing the total number of journalists slaughtered by the Israelis to 256. These are the facts on the ground. And I just want to interject real quick to say, anyone who is under the impression that being angry with Israel over what's transpiring in Gaza, in the West Bank, and Lebanon, where there's also allegedly a ceasefire. Anyone who thinks like, oh, anyone calling this out, they're just anti-Semitic, they just hate the Jews. There are Jews who don't co-sign onto this. No problem with them. There are evangelicals and Jews who do co-sign onto this. Now, do I hate them simply because of their identity or their religious beliefs? No, I hate them because of this ideology that makes them believe that they're actually the good guys as they're slaughtering tens of thousands of children in the quest to steal more land. I'm just calling it like I see it. It has nothing to do with Jewish religion. It has nothing to do with Jewish identity. It has everything to do with the ongoing injustices and slaughter that everyone on the international stage has been witnessing for the last 2 years. And it's endless. It is absolutely endless. The entitlement of the Israelis, the absolute disregard for human life, the perpetual victimhood as they're the ones who are doing the slaughter and stealing the land. I'm sick of it. I'm sick of it. And more importantly, the use of the word anti-Semite or anti-Semitism, just basically taking it and destroying what that word means entirely. That word means nothing anymore. Because anyone and everyone has been called an anti-Semite at this point when they've seen the slaughter of those kids and have expressed utter disgust with the fact that it continues to happen. They're anti-Semites apparently, okay. Benjamin Netanyahu ordered the Israeli military to carry out these powerful strikes, as he referred to them, after an IDF soldier, 37-year-old Master Sergeant Yonah Ephraim Feldbaum, was killed in Rafah. So since an IDF soldier was killed, and by the way, it is unclear exactly what happened and how this individual was killed, but because one IDF soldier was killed, that means over 100 Palestinians need to be slaughtered, including 46 children. A military source said the attack took place in the southern city of Rafah on the Israeli side of the so-called Yellow Line, which demarcates IDF-controlled territory inside Gaza under the ceasefire deal. There is no ceasefire deal. There is slaughter and land theft happening right now in Gaza as we speak. Okay, for Mr. wannabe Nobel Peace Prize winner Donald Trump, he can go ahead and try to lie to the American people and everyone else on the international stage all he wants. He has not brokered a peace deal, and this isn't a ceasefire. Ceasefire means that you stop the slaughter. And that's not what the IDF has any interest in doing. That's not what the Israelis have any interest in doing. Sergeant Feldbaum was killed when one of the vehicles of an IDF engineering team that was dismantling an underground tunnel route in Rafah was hit by fire from terrorists in the area, according to the source. But Hamas says that they were not involved in the shooting and that it may have been carried out by a rogue Palestinian militant. It could have been carried out by one of the gangs that Israel admitted to funding in the Gaza Strip. And look, here's what I know for sure. There's only one thing when it comes to the death of this IDF soldier that I know without a shadow of a doubt. I don't trust the Israelis at all, at all. So until I see some actual confirmation of what happened, an independent body investigating this to clarify exactly what happened, I'm not gonna buy their narrative at all because they're known liars. That's what they do. They lie, they kill, and they steal. That is what the IDF is known for now. And that's not according to me. That's according to anyone who's been paying attention to this story. I'm just telling the truth. So they reiterated, meaning Hamas, they reiterated that they were committed to this make-believe imaginary ceasefire. There is no ceasefire, okay? The slaughter continues. And the slaughter is very much carried out by one side, where hundreds of people get killed in a single night, and then they somehow make themselves out to be the victims. It is the most, it is awe-inspiring, it really is. It really is, the lack of self-awareness, the lack of personal responsibility, the inability to see how the Israelis look like absolute monsters on the international stage right now. And we as Americans also look like monsters. Because we're the ones funding that welfare state. We're the ones funding the bombs that are being dropped on the heads of all those children, all those elderly people, all those innocent civilians. And the thing that sucks is that we have absolutely no power to stop it. Oh, this wonderful democracy that we live in where you have two sides of the political aisle firmly up the ass of the Israeli government. Well, what a democracy. Where literally you can't vote for someone who's gonna put a stop to this. Because our politicians are either blackmailed, bribed, compromised, you get the point. There's a second reason the Israelis gave for launching the strikes. I don't really care what reasons they have. I don't take anything that comes out of the Israelis seriously at all. But to do my due diligence, why don't we hear about how it has to do with the bodies of the deceased hostages? Let's take a look.
Yeah, so overnight, Hamas transferred the remains of a body that Israel says it already partially recovered earlier in the war. And Israel calls that a major violation because they're still waiting for the bodies of 13 deceased hostages that are still in Gaza. But Israeli officials tonight are also pointing to this video that they're posting online today, which appears to show Hamas fighters removing a body in the very left corner of the screen right there, removing a body of a deceased hostage from a house so that they could bury it. You see that right there. They then, a few minutes later, move that body with a bulldozer, and then watch this. They pretend that they had just discovered it to hand it over to the Red Cross and then Israel. Israeli officials have been livid about this, with one telling me, quote, they're making a joke out of the Red Cross and us, and it's proof Hamas knows where all the deceased hostages are, and therefore proof Hamas is slow rolling their return. But again, a US official tells me Hamas actually only knows where half the bodies are. There are many deceased hostage bodies buried under the rubble in Gaza, and that while Hamas must make a good faith effort to make haste and return those bodies, Israel must exhibit, quote, patience.
Well, I mean, obviously, the only just response to that is to kill 46 children, which is what the IDF did. Hamas, on the other hand, says that it was Israel that violated the ceasefire agreement. And to be sure, they have violated the ceasefire agreement in a multitude of ways. Okay, so one of the ways is they were supposed to allow 600 humanitarian aid trucks into the Strip. They have not been doing that. Wow, I'm so shocked and chagrined. That was the most predictable thing on the planet. And as we know, the killings slowed down a little bit, but they didn't stop. Nonetheless, after the deadly strikes on Gaza, Donald Trump defended Israel's decision to slaughter all those kids and all those innocent civilians, because why not? Let's take a look.
They say it was sniper fire, and it was retribution for that, and I think they have a right to do that.
Well, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Republican Congresswoman, has a different take. Luckily, there are some of us who aren't unhinged lunatics who salivate at the slaughter of innocent people. She writes, Israel's military said Wednesday that the ceasefire was back on in Gaza after it killed 104 people, including 46 children, according to local health officials. 46 children. Are these not war crimes? They're war crimes when anyone else does it, but when it's the Israelis, the precious, precious Israelis, well, they're above international law. They're above needing to act like normal human beings that actually believe in humanity. They can do whatever they want. They can kill American citizens and get away with it, as they have. And after the strike that killed over 100 Gazans, Israel declared that the ceasefire is still in effect. Still in effect. Because ceasefire to the Israelis means you cease, we fire. And that's what they've been doing. Except here's this, after it was announced the restoration, what a joke, restoration of the ceasefire. The Israeli military said it carried out another airstrike in northern Gaza, targeting what it called a site where weapons were being stored for an imminent attack. Al-Shifa Hospital in Gaza City said it received 2 bodies from the strike. Is anyone really still in denial about what's really going on here? What would it need to be? How many people in Gaza would need to be slaughtered by the Israelis for the genocide deniers to finally accept what the reality is? That's what I'm curious about. 46 kids in a single night slaughtered by Israel's military. And you'll still have pathetic, embarrassing goons like Emily Austin running around talking about how wonderful, how democratic, how lovely Israel really is. The checks must clear real easy. But anyway, despite Trump immediately running to Bibi's defense after the initial strikes, other officials within the government, meaning the US government, made a pretty stark admission to PBS reporter Nick Shirfin. So I'm sure PBS will be privatized and purchased by one of the Ellisons soon. But before that happens, luckily we get sound bites like this.
A US official warns to me tonight they are still worried that Israel is trying to look for an excuse to, quote, level the place, as in level Gaza, restart the war. So the US is trying to prevent that, make sure the ceasefire holds.
Come on. Israel's gonna do whatever it wants. There is no ceasefire. They're still killing people. They're still stealing land. They have no intention of leaving the portion of the Gaza Strip, somewhere around 53% that they're currently occupying. There's no question about that. They want to take that land. Trump talking about how like, we're not gonna let the Israelis annex the West Bank. They're annexing it right now as we speak. We're not stupid. We can think for ourselves. We can see what's happening. We ignore mainstream corporate US media, which is totally controlled by the Zionist agenda. You pay attention to actual news and what's happening on the ground there in Gaza and the West Bank and Lebanon and the Middle East in general. And you see the picture pretty clearly. There's no amount of lying from the Trump administration that's going to cover up the crimes that are currently being committed and have been committed by the Israelis over the last 2 years.
Every time you ring the bell below, an angel gets his wings. Totally not true, but it does keep you updated on our live shows.